Hello and welcome to the third and final of our background videos from the book of Exodus. In this video we are going to focus almost entirely on the tabernacle. Now the tabernacle covers something like 12 chapters of the book of Exodus out of 40. More than a quarter of the book is dedicated to this one topic. And so it might be valuable for us to dig into this topic a little bit and see why it was worth so much space. What you see here is a picture of a replica of the tabernacle in real life, full size. This is located in this place called Timnah in southern Israel. And what you see is the outer fence that goes around the whole thing with posts made to hold it up and fabric running between. And then a tent-like structure here, the tabernacle itself. And in the courtyard you see the altar and the basin. If we look at a layout of what it looks like, you see the same thing. The fence that goes all the way around, the altar of burnt offering. This is where people would come into this courtyard. The priest would take their animals and they would kill them. And then they would be placed on the altar where they would be burned all the way up, or in some cases cooked, because the meat was kept for the Levites in many cases. Then you have here the bronze laver, sometimes called the bronze sea or the basin. And this was a place where the priests would go and ceremonially wash their hands so that they could become pure and enter into the presence of God. The tent-like structure is divided into two parts. The holy place is the outer room. The most holy place is the inner room. In the outer room, you have three pieces of furniture. You have the table of showbread, or the table of the presence, as it's sometimes called. You have the golden lampstand and the altar of incense. Then you have a curtain separating off a smaller inner room, and in that is the Ark of the Covenant. Each one of these pieces of furniture has a function and a symbolism that goes with it. So the Ark of the Covenant was a wooden box that was covered with gold and had a lid that sat on the top. On one end of the lid, well, actually on both ends of the lid, there was a statue of an angel called a cherubim. These angels had wings that came up and together in the center of the lid. That area under the wings was known as the mercy seat, or the throne of God. And that was considered to be the place of God's presence upon the earth. So this ark sat in the most holy place, and it was a symbol of God's kingship. Now, close to the curtain between the holy place and the most holy place is where the incense altar stood. And on that altar, they burned incense that would create both smoke and an aroma, a scent that you could could smell. The idea here was that God is spirit. He is not flesh. And so even though you have the mercy seat, the throne of God on the Ark of the Covenant, there's nothing there because God is spirit. And so he is invisible by nature, and thus his presence is a mystery, and this is symbolized by the incense that is burned on the altar and the smoke and the aroma that goes along with that. The table of the presence was a table that on it was kept bread, and the bread was changed out regularly, and that bread was a picture of our fellowship with God, right? We eat together around a meal, that's fellowship, also fellowship with one another. The lampstand was very ornate, was kept lighted all the time, and it is a picture of both the original creation and a symbol of the hope of the new creation that is to come. Of course, the altar on the outside was where the sacrifice for sin took place, and the basin was where the cleansing, the regeneration, the beginning of becoming made pure took place as well. Now, as you're beginning to see, there's a lot of symbolism associated with the tabernacle. And you see this in the language, the wording of the book of Exodus, as it's describing. God gives the plans for the book, and then later as Moses and the Israelites are making the tabernacle itself, we have wording here that is reminds us of creation. So there are 7 God says statements that go into the making of the tabernacle, just like there were 7 God spoke statements in Genesis 1. And so there's a list of them there you can look at. When God was done with creation, on the 7th day he rested. Well, when he's done with the instructions of the tabernacle, we're given instructions about Sabbath. And so the rest period, the Sabbath period, is associated with the completion of both the original creation and the tabernacle. Eden, the Garden of Eden, was a place where Adam and Eve met with God. The tabernacle was a place where men meet with God as well. And so it serves a similar function to the garden. The garden had the tree of life there that Adam and Eve had access to. And in the tabernacle, we have this lampstand. And when you read the description, you read about branches and buds and blossoms and the cups that are kind of like flowers. And essentially, the lampstand is a tree just with light on it, with fire on it. And so there's a parallel between those two. When Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden, God sets cherubim to guard the garden. And when you are in the holy place and you look into towards the most holy place in the tabernacle, there is a curtain there, and woven into the curtain are cherubim. So the cherubim are guarding the garden, and the cherubim are guarding the ark and the most holy place as well. Both of them have their openings faced towards the east, right? And there are other parallels that go along here as well. The idea seems to be that the scripture is deliberately echoing the language of creation to show us that the tabernacle is in itself a small model of creation, which is pointing to the idea that God's intention is not just to rescue people, but his overall intention is to restore all of creation. Now, in the book of Exodus, when we read about God coming down and making his covenant with the people, he did it on Mount Sinai. And so we had clouds and lightning and earthquakes, and God was on the top of the mountain, and he had Moses put up rope and keep people off of the base of the mountain, because the entire mountain was considered to be a holy place and they weren't to be there. Then there was also a long description of how they were to purify themselves and to prepare themselves to come into God's presence so that they would be clean. And so the people just could come to the foot of the mountain where they were clean. So when God came down on the mountain, they would be able to interact with him and not be unclean. And if they were unclean, then they were separated away from God. And so we see this kind of division from holy, very holy to clean to unclean and stuff. But the whole thing was overwhelming. The people were overwhelmed. They told Moses, "Don't let God speak to us. This is too much. We can't take it." So what God did was he created the tabernacle, which reflects the very same movement from very holy in the presence of God all the way out towards unclean. And so we see the most holy place, which is very holy. This is the presence of God is located, and it's above this place where we had the pillar of smoke during the day that had fire mixed in or lightning mixed in with it at night. We have the holy place, which would have been like the mountain. People weren't free to go there. Then you have this courtyard area where people can come in and cleanse themselves through their sacrifices, right? And the camp of the people being near to God. And so in this way, God made his presence much more available to the people, but also much less overwhelming. And so we have all this focus on the tabernacle because it is through the tabernacle that God is trying to become close to his people, because his desire is to be with his people. And we see this all through the book of Exodus, as God is trying to come close to his people, be with his people. And this tabernacle is only the first part of God's plan to make that work. In the book of Leviticus, we'll see that this plan fleshed out even more. But for now, this is where we are and what the book of Exodus is all about.